And what is your sense of SARMs in general? Do you think they're relatively safe, or do you have any experience with them?
Yeah, I mean, I know people that have done them, and I tried them myself. They do behave like anabolics. However, they are not like steroids without the steroid side effects as people originally were hoping.
Right.
They do have the same hepatotoxicity or liver toxicity because they are oral. And they also will shut down your own endogenous production of testosterone because your brain senses them as testosterone or testosterone-like molecule and decreases the signal to your testicles to produce your own testosterone.
Right.
And it's just other side effects as well, cholesterol changes, blood lipid changes that emanate from the liver that anabolic steroids have deleterious effects upon, and SARMs do as well. These SARMs were, a lot of money went into the development of these. Mm-hmm. Many good ones were developed, but they were only so good, and they never reached the promise that people were hoping for, and so none has ever been approved to hit the market anywhere in the world, as far as I know.
Welcome back to the Smarter Harder podcast, your home for 1 cent solutions to $64,000 questions. I'm your host again today. My name is Dr. Scott Sherr, and it's a pleasure to be back with all of you. Today, my guest is Patrick Arnold. Patrick has a storied history in the performance space, and he has not been without controversy, but extremely interesting conversation. Here's a quick bio on Patrick. So he is a seasoned organic synthetic chemist with a track record of patent and innovations, both active and expired, recognized contributor to impactful pharmaceutical research articles in high-impact journals. So Patrick is well known for his work in steroids. He is known for prohormones. He invented something called 1AD, something called methylhexanamine, and he's also known for the designer steroid market, including THG, along with the Balco professional sports doping scandal. So we talked about this in detail. He's also known for his work in ketones as well, and Patrick is a organic chemist still working in Illinois and in Connecticut. So in this particular conversation with Patrick, we had a very interesting conversation about multiple different topics. We spoke about steroids in detail for the beginning of the conversation. We talk about some of the trials and tribulations that he's had in the steroid world, making steroids, being involved in the Balco and other scandals, and going to jail actually for 3 months at that time. We talked about who should be taking steroids and the challenge with making a designer steroid, making them less androgenic and more anabolic, which is a big challenge and sort of the holy grail. We talked about SARMs in this context for a little while as well. After speaking about steroids for a while and understanding why the regulatory boards are so up in arms, or were so up in arms back in that time frame with steroids, and something that he developed called Clear, which is something that didn't actually show up on drug tests. Then we changed our conversation over to ketones, ketone metabolism, the formation of ketone esters and ketone salts, and how he was involved with Dominic D'Agostino for a while in this world. And then we finally transitioned over to talk about NAD. We talked about some polyphenols in chocolate that he's very interested in, and some of the experiments that he's doing with alcohol and other kinds of things, especially with NAD. And so this is a really fantastic and overarching conversation with Patrick. He's a very brilliant chemist and has lots of great ideas. His world and his career has not been without controversy, but you have to appreciate what he's been able to do with steroid chemistry, ketone chemistry, and now NAD and others. Enjoy the episode and talk to you soon. All right, Patrick, how are you today?
Hi, Scott. How are you?
I'm good. So thanks so much. I really do appreciate you spending some time with us today on the Smarter Not Harder podcast, where we really try to interview people that have done amazing things in their life. Doesn't matter if it's been controversial or lack thereof, but certainly yours has been, your life story up to this point has been very controversial at times, because you've been trying to push the envelope. And in fact, so much so that I think you spent how many months in jail? You said 3 months. Is that right?
It's just 3 months, yes.
And then the rest, was it on probation, or how long were you on a probationary period?
After that, I don't remember how many weeks or months I had of house arrest.
Okay.
Could have been another 3 months of house arrest.
Okay.
Or something. And then I had 2 years of probation.
2 years of probation. Okay. And so it's when you're living in a life where you're trying to push the envelope with things, especially when you're doing things that are very novel, as you have, like, it's amazing. Unfortunately, the sort of the power of the government seemed like just kind of came over you, and you didn't have much of a choice but to go to jail, it sounds like, even if you didn't do anything wrong. And I think that that's really what most of us in the world of health and wellness really believe, that you didn't do anything, and you just were made an example of, unfortunately, because of other very high profile people like Barry Bonds and Mark McGuire and others that were breaking records that they never would have broken, except if they hadn't been able to get access to some of the things that you had created. And you didn't, and I think that what's interesting is you didn't make these things for that reason. And I think that's where I want to go and start off with, is because you're very much known for the world of steroid chemistry and how you were able to create various compounds in here. I think one of the ways I wanted to start off this and asking this question is, why do you think people are so afraid of steroids? And why were they so afraid of them back then, when you were doing all this work?
Well, I think that when steroids first came around, people's first exposure to anabolic steroids as in their role in athletics were looking at these people that were extraordinarily muscular for their time and for the people that they competed against. You couple that with these women, for instance, from East Germany back in the 70s and 80s, I don't know if you remember, but they were quite virilized, masculinized. And that was a shock to people. There's women that looked like they needed with 5 o'clock shadow and, big, bulky shoulders, and that are killing it in the track and field, shoving that shot put, way farther than anybody else. And that just looked very unnatural and just artificial and kind of scary, kind of like a sci-fi movie or something.
Sure.
And then I think another milestone moment would be when Ben Johnson broke that world record at the Olympics.
Right.
Now, everyone was taking steroids. We know now, I know at least, Carl Lewis and everyone else, they may not say it, but Ben Johnson got caught, and Ben Johnson was particularly responsive to them, or he was just a particularly muscular person, and he broke the record, and it's controversial about what may have happened, but he got caught. Other people did not get caught. At that time, a lot of positives were brushed under the table, not Ben Johnson, and it was a disgrace, and everyone at the time, I wouldn't say everyone, but not 99% of the people out there were like, okay, well, Ben cheated. Everyone else did. Well, look at Ben. He's so much bigger than anyone, so he has to be the only one that was doing that.
Right.
It's not the case, but that stuck in people's memory, and that kind of laid a foundation for how people perceive these drugs. And then it came around with baseball and the steroid scandal, steroid age, I guess you would call it. And these guys up there at the plate are pretty damn huge guys. And not only that, but you look at Barry Bonds. He went from a skinny guy to an extremely bulky guy that just hit that ball so hard, he'd almost miss and he would hit a home run. It was like a pop-up. But so that was really, that's why people, it's divergent thoughts on it. Right. Some people are like, oh, this is great. It's so entertaining. I want to go out and see these monsters hit the ball so far. It's a great thing. And then people are like, this is just hideous. All my heroes, Ruth and Aaron and Mickey Mantle, they were pure American good guys. And this is just so wrong.
Right. Yeah.
It's a little silly, in my opinion, but that's how people think.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think that people always think that the past is better on some level. They have this rosy picture of what happened in the past that's always better than what's happening in the future with progress or with changes. And I think, steroid chemistry is a big part of that. And you've been involved, and you were involved for many years in, I think initially you started off in the bodybuilding world yourself, taking these, correct? And then you started making them yourself. What brought you to the point where you started wanting to make them yourself or find ones to make yourself?
Well, my first job out of college, I was in a lab in New Jersey. Had a very boring job, and I set up a reaction that was a polymerization reaction. All I had to do was add a free radical catalyst every half hour or hour. And my boss was just not there, and there was really nothing else to do. And I wasn't very proactive in doing things that would have been for the benefit of the company. So I just did things that I wanted to do as a mischievous youngster.
Got it.
And that would include researching the manufacture of recreational drugs or things that are fitness related, because I was into going to the gym, and the enhancement, whether it be nutritional or pharmaceutical, was interesting to me. So there was a library on the floor where I was at, pretty well stocked chemistry library, and I did a lot of research into all these things, and I figured out how to make some simple anabolic steroids. I was able to order the chemicals through the company, the precursors, and then react them to make the actual drugs themselves.
Okay. And so while you were doing this, were you looking to just create molecules that were already well established, or
yes, I was. I was just making the simple things: methyl testosterone, methyl dihydrotestosterone, and then a few more esoteric ones. Something called oxymethylone and stanozolol. Yeah, I made all these. They all went on a certain trajectory of, one could convert to the other, and
sure.
And I followed some of those pathways, and I made various amounts of a lot of things.
Got it.
And there were different precursors that would go to different classes of the anabolic steroids. Like there's a 19-nor class, and there's some other ones, the 13 beta ethyl class.
Mm-hmm. And what was the goal with all the sort of the variable ones that you did? Were you trying to find like the perfect one that was, non-androgenic and more anabolic, or is that, I know you've talked about that a lot.
There were certain books published and a lot of articles published. The books published were more research compilations. They would just look at all the literature up until the point that before that book was published, and they would review the steroids that they knew had been made and what their properties were, whether it be anabolic and androgenic being the masculinizing properties and anabolic being the supposedly pure muscle building properties.
Right.
But not only that, but there was a lot of other variable properties that people didn't know at the time, such as propensity to convert to estrogens or cross reactivity with mineralocorticoid receptors, which can affect salt and water retention. So all these had different, above and beyond just their muscle building effects, a whole slew of other secondary effects or tertiary effects.
What was the whole?
So
Go ahead.
And I always thought that, oh my God, there's got to be the perfect steroid out there. And then some are better than others, but they really are just playing with the same class of compounds. You're not going to get that much variability.
Understood. So, and that's kind of what my question was going to be. Was there ever, what was the sort of the holy grail that you were looking for? What was the ideal steroid that you kind of never found, but we're always looking for? What were the properties that everybody wanted on the perfect steroid?
I would say that it would be a very powerful muscle builder without excessive water retention, which can lead to fatigue. It can lead to high blood pressure.
Right.
It can hinder performance. One that doesn't make you, and also can make you too tight or just too heavy. One that does not cause distressing psychiatric issues. Like some steroids, it's just this one called halotestin, that, and I think it might interfere with enzymes or receptors involved in cortisol metabolism and cortisol activity. And it seemed to cause a very agitated state in the mind, or it could be a GABA-related thing. I don't know. Whereas other ones, such as one of the most well-known ones is called Dianabol. Yes. That one generally gives a very pleasant feeling. People do not, there's no like roid rage associated with that, okay, so to speak. So I would look for something that would do everything positive and nothing negative, essentially. And there's a whole list of positive things and a list of negative things.
Yes, and there's really no perfect one, it sounds like, but a lot of this was sort of dose dependent, is from what I understand as well. Some of these steroids worked really well at lower doses. What was as far as looking at sort of brain neurochemistry with some of these steroids, I know that there's some knowledge that some of them in fact kind of interact with the GABA receptor. Do we have any sense of which ones worked on the GABA receptors most significantly that you knew of, or was it kind of not really clear?
My research, as far as steroids go, steroid hormones in the body and the GABA receptors, have to do with mostly endogenous steroid hormones.
Okay.
DHEA would be an example of a GABA A antagonist.
Right.
Antagonist.
Right.
So when you take it, it actually causes you get a little bit more neuroexcitatory effect because it's your GABA glutamate ratio or
balance. Yeah.
Altered.
Yes.
It's going to be a little bit more excitatory.
Yep.
On the other hand, progesterone metabolites, especially 5-alpha reduced progesterone metabolites, are known to be GABA. I don't remember exactly. I don't know if they're actually GABA agonists or they may bind to a site on the receptor, increasing its affinity for GABA.
Sure. So
it's one or the other. But
either way, increasing GABA. Sure. Yeah.
Yes. And there's one in particular called allopregnanolone.
Right.
5-alpha allopregnanolone that is pretty potent. It's right up there with your benzodiazepines as far as its effect, pharmacological effect.
And so that's being affected on the GABA receptors themselves.
Yes. And that is when a woman's cycle, there's a certain period in their cycle. I think it's right before, it's definitely not during the premenstrual period. In fact, the premenstrual period may be a reaction to previous progesterone elevation,
right,
and an abundance of these GABA promoting
progesterone
metabolites.
Right. Sure. Yep.
So there's a period in a woman's cycle where she feels good and relaxed, and then boom, the progesterone goes down.
Right.
Their mood goes south, and whether a man or woman, we both know what that's like.
Yes, of course. Yes.
You're either as an objective observer or a subjective self.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
Yes, I think neurosteroids, we know how neurosteroids themselves have a profound effect on multiple receptors, but including the GABA receptors as well. So I agree with you that understanding the biochemistry of our own endogenous neurosteroids is really important because they all have effects on the GABA receptors, which, for those that don't know, have significant effect on the brakes of our neurologic firing, right? So GABA is really important for inhibition of neurologic firing and also have effects on anxiety and stress and helping with sleep and things like that. So I know that at least I've heard some of these sort of more synthetic steroid derivatives have had people stay up for days, for example, have more like a stimulant effect. Others will have more of a relaxing effect kind of deal. And as you were developing some of these, you were developing ones that were already on the market. When did you decide that you're going to start making your own and kind of looking at making your own companies with even the ones you'd sort of derived that are already described before?
Okay, so I would like to separate that into two different steroid type compounds,
sure,
products. The first being prohormones. And that's where I originally, when I got into the nutritional supplement industry, I introduced the concept of prohormones.
Yeah, let's talk about what prohormones are. Yeah.
Okay. Well, at that time, dihydroepiandrosterone, DHEA, was being sold mostly to people that would buy them from overseas pharmacies and get it shipped to the United States. And a lot of people took them at that time, there was no cure for AIDS, and people would use these products as supposedly to enhance the immune system and or for physical effects,
energy,
I
etc.
suppose.
Sure.
And I had, during my research into steroids, come across androstenedione, which was a precursor to testosterone, 2 hydrogen atoms away. And the East Germans had used that, and they actually had a patent on it. So I remember when I started working in the nutritional supplement industry, I thought back to androstenedione. I said, okay, if people are selling DHEA, this is almost the same thing. DHEA actually converts to androstenedione. So I think, well, this is not a controlled substance. It's not a drug. It really has no classification. And at that period of time, there was the DHEA Act, which was the Nutritional Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, 1994. And many interpretations of it suggested that there would be no impediment to marketing androstenedione, just like there was none to marketing DHEA as a supplement. And at that point, 96 or so, it was being sold as a supplement. So I introduced androstenedione, expecting my doors to be broken down at any time. It's kind of silly if you think back about it. Mm-hmm. But it was a ballsy move because a lot of people, I've told some people I was doing this, and they were like, oh, you're not going to do that. You're going to get in big trouble. Oh, you're going to be in big trouble. Never did. Suddenly everyone else starts selling it. And then I went on to making other prohormones, androstenediol, and then these one, which refers to a position of the double bond, one androstenedione, one is androstenediol. And these were progressively more and more potent precursors, but they're all naturally occurring to one degree or another. So you have those, and those were sold out in the open and through a supplement company that I had called ErgoPharm. And they were also sold, and we actually manufactured some of these ourselves and sold sold them in bulk to other companies. We then marketed it on their own private label.
Right. And these were all prohormones. These are all the prohormones.
These are the prohormones.
And so maybe you can just define what a prohormone is. I think you mentioned it briefly, but I think that this is something that I think now know of relatively well. But why did you think that these would not be regulated compared to some of the other products that you were looking at?
Well, that's why I mentioned DHEA, right? Because that was marketed without any uproar, without any interference, and no one. So I figured this is not any different than DHEA. Legally, there's really no differentiation. So I said, they're not going to come after this if they're not coming after DHEA, and I was correct. And then, of course, that kind of broke the dam, and then you just kind of, everyone's rushing for this, that one, and that one.
Right.
But a lot of people would start selling things that were not prohormones or that were not natural.
I see.
And that's that kind of, and we're talking about an interpretation of DHEA at the time.
Yes.
The FDA many, many years later said, okay, well, we didn't mean it this way. And they had all these caveats about the very ambiguous law that everyone would interpret it to their own benefit, right, or to, or from a regulatory standpoint, the FDA would interpret it. So that became a very popular and lucrative segment of the supplement industry, and, specifically the sports supplement industry.
Right. And the argument there was that these prohormones are naturally happening in the body, right? So and there's also some sort of governor on the wheel, right? You only can make so much of these if you're taking them because of the other steps in the process, correct?
Yeah, that was how it was presented, that these there's a self-governing, as you would say, mechanism in your body, and that's enzyme availability.
Yes.
So only so many of these can convert to the active hormone, and much of it will stay in its inactive precursor or prohormone form.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the argument that I've heard as well. So 1AD was your androstenedione was sort of your most potent of these that you made, correct?
1-androstenedione, yes, that reached a level where it was comparable to many prescription anabolic steroids, not some of the really, really potent ones, but some of the, it was as good as a muscle builder as many of these more milder anabolic steroids, just primobolan. I would say it was at least as good.
Yeah.
At the correct dosage, of course. All drugs, the dose makes the poison, and the dose makes the
difference,
positive effects too. So
no, I get that. Okay, and so that was sort of one of, you wanted to break down the question I asked you a little while ago into sort of two sections. The first was on the prohormone side, and that's the 1AD story. What's the other side of the story? What's the other aspect?
Well, the other side of the story is something that when I was researching anabolic steroids to make all anabolic steroids, whether they be naturally occurring or not, I came across a bunch of ones that had been researched, tested, at least some in humans, some only in animals, and shown to be quite effective but for one reason or another, never did make it to market.
Mhm.
And I was always interested in some of these. One particular called norbolethone, which is very closely related to a female hormone, a progestin found in birth control pills called levonorgestrel.
Yep.
It's actually the precursor to norbolethone. Now, another thing I thought about, because I was familiar with athletic events and the doping testing and how they detect anabolic steroids, which are specific to the compounds and or their metabolites.
Okay.
I knew that certain ones, especially norbolethone was the first one that kind of jumped out at me, would not be detected because it has a structural anomaly on it.
Okay.
And that's this functional group, the 13 position on the steroid ring.
Okay.
And it's an ethyl group as opposed to a methyl group, 2 carbons as opposed to 1 carbon. And so and that's a part of the structure that does not change in metabolism of the parent compound. So that will stick around. It will be there as the parent compound. It will stick around all metabolites, and that will throw everything off because you'll be 15 Daltons, whatever, of molecular weight off every time because you have an extra carbon and its associated hydrogens.
Got it. And so then as a result of that, was that sort of spurred your interest in looking to create these products because of their potential from not coming up?
Yeah. Well, my mind was clicking. I was like, okay, you know something? Boy, if I was an athlete and I was subject to doping testing and I had access to something like this, boy, that would really be valuable to me.
Sure.
If I was so inclined to go there, so to speak.
Yeah.
And of course, there are people that will go there, as I found out. And I don't remember how exactly I met the first people that I did this with, but I had no trouble because actually people would come to me and ask me about the prohormones. They say, oh, if I take these, will I test positive, or can I take these and skirt a drug test? And people would ask me that. And I said, no, don't try to skirt a drug test with the prohormones because you'll probably fail. And at one point I said, yeah, but there's these other things. And then there wasn't very long after that, and I started making this stuff. One of the companies that my company had a joint venture with called Metrex, the owner of Metrex and his sidekick at the time, and I would hang out and talk about stuff. And I told him about this norbolethone, and I said, you know, I could make that stuff, and I think it's really good. It's really good on paper. And I said, if I had this levonorgestrel, I could make that stuff. And so I'm out there in wherever they are in California. I don't remember where it was. So I come back to Illinois. Next thing I know, there's like 100 grams of levonorgestrel in my mailbox.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm like, holy dang. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, if you were to buy that on the market, you spend tens of thousands, $10,000. I don't know. It just showed up for free. And I never even, I mean, and for years I was making norbolethone, and I never went through the whole damn thing. It ended up in a trash at one point.
Wow.
But yeah, I started making that stuff, and I started distributing it to people. And next thing I know, people hear about it, people want it.
Right.
People have big mouths.
Right. And this is where all the celebrity trainers started getting a hold of it and started using it with their clients. And this is where it all kind of went down for you in the sense, because these were called the clear products, correct? That's what they were calling them?
Yes. Yes. That was the first iteration or whatever of the clear. And there were 2 others after that.
Gotcha. And so what was the sort of the culmination of all this for you was obviously the jail sentence and the whole market sort of getting shut down by, was it the FDA at the time? Or talk a little bit about that. I don't want to talk about it in too much detail because it's not that interesting. I think for people, I want to get over to your work in ketones and NAD because you have a lot of other cool things that you're doing. But I think I'd like to try to sort of wrap it up a little bit in the sense of what was sort of what kind of came down, what happened at the end there were
the 2 things, and they were kind of parallel paths.
Okay.
And they both affected one another. Or my work with the undetectable steroids, the clear derivatives, that kind of thing, that leaked out in part because I made a big name for myself with these prohormones. The DHEA did not like the prohormones.
I see.
And then word got out, somehow leaked out, that I was also making these hormone. I was making steroids that people would use to cheat. And one person that my girlfriend at the time was giving it to, was a track cyclist, and she just would not. She took too much and just really freaked people out. And they popped her for norbolethone. And at the time, I had switched to another one called THG, tetrahydrogestrinone. But she did not heed my warning and did not switch to tetrahydrogestrinone. And I had heard through the guy I was working with, one of the many people I worked with, but probably the most well-known, his name is Victor Conti.
Mm-hmm.
He had an inside guy at the lab at UCLA that said that they're on to norbolethone. And so Victor told me, and that's when I came up with THG. But this woman did not heed my warning, and she continued to take norbolethone, and she got in trouble. And then I got a call from the reporter at the Washington Post asking me about norbolethone, busting me, just chasing me down. Like I think of the Incredible Hulk series, or
sure.
They chase down Bruce Banner.
Yep.
Depressed, and he runs. I'm running away. Like, leave me alone. And it was really starting to scare me. But yeah, and then that kind of led indirectly maybe to the demise, or hastened the demise, of the prohormones as well, which just the FDA did not like them. They said this is not what we had in mind when we agreed to the text of DHEA as written by Congress. And we interpret it much differently. And so we got to get rid of these prohormones. And they decided to, by a bill in Congress that was signed by the president, to make these products controlled substances along with other classic anabolic steroids.
Wow.
And that put an end, for the most part, to prohormones. Got it. And then the whole thing with Balco, Victor Conti, and his just ostentatious promotion and distribution of those substances, that just led to, and then Barry Bonds just being a jerk.
Yeah.
I think the IRS got obsessed with him to bring him down.
Yeah, he wasn't paying taxes, right? Yeah, so yeah, that's crazy.
It converged into just a disaster for me.
Yeah. And it sounds like, I mean, you were just making these things. It wasn't you giving them to athletes. It wasn't, you weren't.
Well, I did give an athlete. I don't want to come across as a complete saint here. Okay. And we have to understand that it's a murky ethical area.
Yes.
And some people will say, okay, well, these athletes, you didn't kill anyone. It's a victimless crime. And I said, well, you might look at it as a victimless crime because no one got hurt by these things, because they were taking, the athletes that compete, they don't take them at dosages that are going to cause physical harm to them. Because basically, when you take steroids and they cause physical harm, you are hindering your performance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And plus, these people do not want to take too much of these things. They want just enough to enhance performance.
Right.
So, yeah, I think of it as victimless. However, you look at it and you think about the competition. Someone takes these things and they can win a gold medal. Well, how about the people that didn't have access to it, who got beaten, that may otherwise have won the gold medal? You might look at them as victims. And it's, like I said, it's murky ethical area. Sure. It's not like you're killing someone or sexual assault or anything like that. But people, people have varying opinions,
and they're allowed to, right? And I think that's okay, right? Because I think that there are so many people that are working in the gray area and doing a lot of great work, right? Doing a lot of great chemistry, doing a lot of great work with clients. I spoke to somebody earlier today, a clinician that works with mental health patients and does everything out of the box, taking them off their antipsychotics and giving them red light therapy to their brains and giving them methylene blue and all these other things. And like people like that are also vilified because they're out of the system, but they can do great work and help a lot of people. So I think I'm totally cool with the gray, and I appreciate that you've been in that world for a long time, Patrick. And I know that you kind of transitioned from, I guess my last question for steroids, for one more question there before we move on is, there's there's obviously a lot of things available now on the black market, the research chemical side, the research, and even though a lot of these markets were shut down many years ago, they still exist, as you know. If everything you know now from all the synthesis that you did, all the prohormones, like what advice like would you give people that are thinking about taking anabolics overall? Do you have like a general sense of what you would, I mean, because we know people are going to do these things. I mean, whether it's for a movie role, and this is how one of my colleagues got involved in doing some consultations for this in the sense of like working with actors that are getting huge for roles in movies like 300 or something, right? These people are not naturally that huge, of course, right? So,
Right.
but in general, like if you, do you have any sort of recommendations for people as to, where they would want to start or go, or just what to think about? I mean, you don't have to talk about dosing or anything, but just some ideas there.
It's very tragic that our lawmakers took these drugs out of the hands of responsible physicians that would have, in a different world, prescribed these for cosmetic, anti-aging purposes.
Right. Longevity.
You can't do that.
Right.
You will go to prison. I know doctors that, oh, okay, why can't I prescribe androstenedione to my chiropractic patients? And there's one guy actually started doing that. And, well, no, they caught up to him, and he did his life. His career did not end well.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. So, yeah, I mean, people need to know how to navigate the world of performance enhancement, whether it be anabolic steroids or peptide hormones, such as growth hormone, or a lot of these quite effective growth hormone secretagogues, as they're called,
right,
that are available on these research chemical websites, and they work. And there's also selective androgen receptor modulators, or SARMS, and these are non-steroidal androgen receptor agonists. So they're kind of steroids that aren't steroids, but they do the same thing. They work via the same genetic pathways that anabolic steroids do. They activate the same genes, deactivate the same genes that lead to muscle growth and strength. But people, they have to figure it out for themselves, because you cannot, either that or they hire some trainer, to kind of clandestinely leads them along. Like you said, these Hollywood athletes. And I know some people that do the diet and the training and the anabolics for these people that get into tremendous shape for these roles. They can afford it, and they know who they have access to these people, but your average person does not, and they cannot go to their doctor. They cannot go to a cosmetic surgeon or someone that does anti-aging medicine. Though that's not necessarily true, because a lot of anti-aging doctors do use testosterone replacement.
Yes,
and growth hormone replacement, and under the guise of that, okay, you're optimizing hormone levels as that are declined with age, such as growth hormone, and testosterone and other hormones as well, thyroid hormones, which is fine, but they only can legally optimize. They can't give you super physiological doses and make you into a bodybuilder looking person necessarily. They can make you look fitter, but not, grotesquely huge.
Right. Right. Yes. I mean, I think that there's definitely there's a longevity component to these, right? I think what you're talking about also on the chiropractic side with the chiropractor is that, sarcopenia is a big problem.
Wait. No, actually, he was not a chiropractor. Oh. He was a cosmetic surgeon.
Cosmetic surgeon. Okay. Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah. But in any regard, using things that are kind of going to prevent sarcopenia are a big deal, right? Sarcopenia is muscle loss as we age. And so we do have more, anti-aging doctors, if you want to call them, wellness doctors that are using things like testosterone and DHEA and growth hormone and using those. But I think that you're right. I think it's difficult to navigate this if you're not looking at it for those reasons. If you're looking at it for strength, for performance, how do you cycle them? How you stop them? What kind of dosing? I think it's a real challenge out there. And what is your sense of SARMs in general? Do you think they're relatively safe, or do you have any experience with them?
Yeah, I mean, I know people that have done them, and I tried them myself. They do behave like anabolics. However, they are not like steroids without the steroid side effects as people originally were hoping.
Right.
They do have the same hepatotoxicity or liver toxicity because they are oral, and they also will shut down your own endogenous production of testosterone because your brain senses them as testosterone or testosterone-like molecule, and decreases the signal to your testicles to produce your own testosterone.
Right.
And it's just other side effects as well, cholesterol changes, blood lipid changes that emanate from the liver that anabolic steroids have deleterious effects upon, and SARMs do as well. These SARMs were a lot of money went into the development of these. And many good ones were developed, but they were only so good, and they never reached the promise that people were hoping for. And so none has ever been approved and hit the market anywhere in the world, as far as I know.
Right. They're still just on the black market.
They're just on the research chemical side. So
yeah.
These are basically investigational new drugs.
Right.
I guess that's the classification for them.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, let's transition over, because I think the first time I heard about you actually was not on the steroid side, was actually on the ketone side, from my colleague, Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, and some of the work that you were doing there for a long time. I think it might be interesting to talk about sort of the evolution of understanding ketone metabolism and understanding ketones as products and how we could use them. So maybe you can give us a little bit of a backstory there and talk about the first couple that you developed and maybe some differences between esters and salts. And we can go through that a little bit, because I think this is really important. I remember when this all came out in 2015, 2016, and trying to wade through this stuff, learning about it with Dom and with you and some of your early products as well. So, and then on the performance side, this certainly is, it's definitely a through line for you from the steroid stuff to ketones, because that's probably what interested you in the first place, I'm guessing.
Yes. I can give you the backstory.
Yeah.
And yes, they interested me. And that was a big part of why I decided to embark upon the research into developing ketone precursors. But it never would have happened if it weren't for Dr. D'Agostino contacting me, saying that he needed a chemist, contract manufacturing chemist, or with a lab. Yep. That can make research quantities of a ketone ester that was developed by a doctor, I think his name was Brunenbacher, and it was a diacetoacetate 1,3-butanediol ester. And Dom gave me a old synthesis for it, and I did a lot of work on it, and I fine-tuned it and made him, well, I made him a monoester and I made him a diester, and he decided to work with the diester, and he got some very remarkable results with him. First, in regards to oxygen toxicity, right, and seizures with rats, and that was kind of a simulation for the application of what Navy SEAL divers undergo when going down with a rebreather.
Yep, 100% non-rebreather.
Under pressure, and oxygen's under pressure, and they get a very large exposure to oxygen, and they could seize. And so that's a big problem. So you want to increase the latency to seizure, or the time it takes for you to actually seize from elevated oxygen levels in the blood. And the ketones seem to do that. Certainly, according to the rat studies, they did it quite efficiently, dramatically. The rats were fine in the oxygen pressurized chamber for much longer than the control rats. Right. And then he went on to do other research with it, metastatic cancer. Yep. You know, they would give the rats a tumor that's highly metastatic. And some they would feed ketones to, some they would feed a bad diet or a regular diet, or, you know, all these different groups. And the ketone ester really seemed to put the kibosh on metastases of that tumor. And that's another great win for Dom. And he ended up getting that, you know, he really made his career off of these exogenous ketones.
Right.
And he really had hit the jackpot as far as his theories were correct, or the theories originally espoused by the guy that developed the compound in the first place, and then later expanded upon by Dominic. And so I made that form, and over the years, I kept making more and more ketone ester, and I got better and better at it until I stopped making it.
But yeah, so to go through that a little bit. So, I mean, so my first understanding of ketone esters came from the study that he published on the combination of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, the ketogenic diet, and a metastatic model of glioblastoma, which is a brain cancer. And and then in correspondence, they did additional studies where they used the ketone ester as a way to help people so they didn't have such a restrictive ketogenic diet, because the restrictive ketogenic diet is very challenging for even animals, but very, very challenging for humans, even more so, as you know. So as you were going through the development cycle of the ketone esters, kind of what made you said you got better and better at it. Like what got better? How did you improve upon it? What did you
just the synthesis process.
Okay.
I cut out some steps where it really weren't necessary and that were quite laborious, and came up with basically what you might call a one-pot synthesis.
One pot. Got it.
I didn't have to, do a huge distillation step. It didn't have to do solvent removal step and all these things. That, as far as Dominic's research and the physiological properties of this, they did no effect upon that, but it just made it so the stuff could be made more readily and cheaper.
Well, that's really important, because I mean, back in 2014 or 15, when this was all coming out, maybe this even earlier with Dom, what was the time frame you guys started working together? Was it around that time or earlier?
I think it was around 2010, 2011 when he first approached me. And I think his first paper, which would be the ones with the rats in the pressurized oxygen chambers, must have come out 2011, 2012.
Yeah, that makes sense, because he still has the grant for the Office of Naval Research Naval Research doing the work on the
DARPA,
or
the naval,
Yeah. So did you have a sense, and maybe it's more of a Dom question and we can always skip it, but in the sense of why the esters were so powerful in this capacity, in the sense of like why they were working so well?
Well, I discussed it with Dominic, and Dominic's theory was that it was because they were based heavily on acetoacetate. And when they broke down in the body, it led to a large amount of acetoacetate being released. So as your ketones, two endogenous ketones are beta hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the acetoacetate to BHB ratio was much higher. And Dom's theory was that acetoacetate has much more of an anti-seizure effect in the brain, whether it be due to acetoacetate or partly due to its spontaneous breakdown of acetone. He thought that had something to do with it too. But it's true, because the BHB ester, which was another ester, Dr. Veach's ester,
yes,
that did not work did not work well in comparison in the seizure models.
Right. And so the BHB ester, was that something similar to the salt, or is that like an ester that had a BHB attached?
No, that was also an ester with 1,3-butanediol.
Okay.
1,3-butanediol is a precursor, metabolic precursor to BHB. So
I see.
For instance, the BHB ester would break down into 1 part BHB and 1 part 1,3-butanediol, which then undergoes 2 enzymatic oxidation reactions, dehydrogenase reactions to BHB.
Got it. Okay. So it's creating more BHB. So maybe changing that ratio that you're describing.
Yeah. So when you do the BHB ester, you're getting a lot of BHB, and the only acetoacetate you get is from subsequent conversion in the body of BHB to acetoacetate.
I see.
With Dom's ester, right off the bat, you get 2 parts acetoacetate released and 1 part butadiol, which then has to go undergo enzymatic transformation to 1 BHB.
Gotcha. That's actually, I didn't know that about the acetoacetate ratio. That's really interesting to me. And then I'm glad you made the point that these are the 2 main ketone products, the acetoacetate and the beta hydroxybutyrate. These are what, fats are breaking down into. I didn't realize that 1,3-butadiol converted into acetoacetate. It can do that directly, or how does it?
Yeah. Well, okay. So you know the metabolism of ethanol?
Sure. Yeah. Alcohol.
Ethanol converts to acetaldehyde.
Yes.
Acetaldehyde converts to acetic acid.
Sure.
Same enzymes.
Okay.
1,3-butanediol converts to a 1,3 or a 3-hydroxybutanol, which is or 3-hydroxybutyraldehyde.
Okay.
That then converts to an extra oxidation, takes the aldehyde to the carboxylic acid. So that converts then to beta hydroxy or 3-hydroxybutyric acid.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I like the chemical steps. I'm seeing them in my mind as you're saying that. So
good. That's the way it's supposed to be.
I appreciate. I wasn't good at organic chemistry. It wasn't for me. The conformations and the things. But I had a bad teacher. That's what I always said. I had a really bad teacher that just wanted to fail.
Teachers make a big difference.
Yeah. My teacher, when I was in organic chem and I went to UCLA actually for undergrad, he hated doctors and didn't want anybody to pass. So it was not a good team.
Guys like that, there's a special place in hell for them.
I know. He actually,
they want to make it hard for everyone.
Yeah, he'd come in.
They feel special.
Yeah, like he would even come in the morning. He'd stay up all night at the lab. Then he'd teach us a class at 8 o'clock in the morning. And just, yeah, he was a terrible human being. But so I didn't learn much organic chemistry. But the funny thing is, learning now because of the companies that we have and the work that I do, it's really great to understand some of this so that you can understand really like where things come from, right? So especially in this case. But I know you guys did you also get involved in salts with Dom or do any salt?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us about that. Yeah.
Well, since I sold supplements traditionally and had a supplement company, I was interested in a supplement alternative to the ketone ester.
Right.
And it made sense to me that, okay, well, you can make a salt of beta hydroxybutyrate or BHB.
Right.
Unfortunately, you cannot make a salt you can make a salt of acetoacetate, but it's very unstable and it will over a short period of time break down to acetone and whatever else I don't remember. But so BHB salts were commercially available, extremely expensive, available as research chemicals, particularly sodium BHB.
Okay.
So I looked into possibility of buying these in bulk. They were not available in bulk, so I developed a synthesis for them.
I see.
From a quite cheap available synthetic precursor, and a pretty simple reaction. And so we started making BHB salts at my facility. We had a huge vacuum dryer oven, and we would manufacture the salts in solution, a solution that ended up being water with some ethanol. And then we put this slurry in trays under vacuum and heat, and it would dry to the salts. And we made sodium salt. We tried to make potassium salt. Potassium was so hygroscopic, which means that it just picked up so much water, from the air, you could never dry it. It would actually turn into a liquid. If you got it dry enough and put it out, within a day, it'd be a liquid again.
Gotcha.
It just sucked up all the moisture from the air. But we did make a calcium salt. It's a little harder to make, but we were able to do that. A magnesium salt could be made, but it's just not worth it. It's hard, and plus you can't take too much magnesium. You'll go running to the bathroom.
Sure.
So we decided we're just going to make calcium and sodium. That's the keto canna product we took, was calcium and sodium.
Right.
Canna, Ca and Na. So then we started making this for a multi-level marketing company called Prove It.
Yep.
We made their salts. They became very successful, and so we made a lot of the salts for them. But as we figured, since we had no patent protection or anything on this, intellectual property protection, they eventually found someone to make it in China for cheaper, and kind of got cut out of the whole thing. But, that's happened to me before.
Of course.
It's reality.
Yeah.
No one's going to be loyal to you
to
their own detriment.
Yeah. So,
it's competitive dog world out there.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. My question on that would be, I think probably many people know and understand, but why were people so interested with ketones and performance in general? What were they noticing? What was the effects that we're having in the performance
Well, there was
world?
a lot of confusion back then. I think people have a little better handle on what our exogenous ketone is and what it can do and what it cannot do. But a lot of people associated ketones with the ketogenic diet and them being a breakdown product of fat metabolism. You go on a ketogenic diet, your body switches from using glucose as a fuel to using fat as a fuel. The end result being an accumulation of these end stage product called ketones, which can be used as fuel in the body. In some cases, they're kind of a super fuel, especially for the brain. So people thought, okay, so the ketogenic diet makes you burn fat. And so, well, I should take exogenous ketones and I'll burn more fat. No, that's not the case. The fact that the ketones go up when you're on the ketogenic diet has nothing to do with the ketones themselves. The fact that your body, the end stage product of fat metabolism, are ketones. So people started to sell these saying they burn fat, and that kind of really upset me because I said, you're going to disappoint a lot of people by giving them a promise, and they will get burned out in these things. They'll say they don't work because they also can do a lot of other things. And for a while there were some researchers done on performance and endurance athletes. And there was some effect there. It wasn't particularly dramatic, however, fortunately. But I think where they all exogenous ketones really shine is in their effect on mitochondrial health, effects on preventing cancer, which is a secondary benefit of the mitochondria being healthy, and brain function, brain balance or brain energy, neuroexcitatory suppression, or
right,
controlling the neuroexcitatory excess, and other things such as that, and of course cancer, which is also a side benefit of mitochondrial health. Yeah, I would have said that, but
no, that's okay. I was gonna circle back there anyway, because I know that from my perspective, using the ketogenic diet, using ketone supplements has been very, very helpful, especially working with people that have cancer. We're looking at a metabolic approach to it, looking at it as the mitochondria being a significant sort of main role in all of that. I think that's great, and I think I've seen a lot of benefit over the years now that there's a lot more products on the market. A lot more interest in the nutrition side as well. So the nutritionists are doing ketogenic diets with their patients and working with cancer and seeing some significant benefits. So I think there's a lot there. And I agree there's a lot on the performance side too. And I remember some of those first claims about fat loss. And I was trying to figure out, I remember reading the claims. I'm like, how is this helping you burn fat? You're taking ketones that are the fat byproducts.
It's a complete misunderstanding of everything.
But they're fuel, right? They're fuel. And I think one of the things that we do know is that ketones are great fuel for your mitochondria. They're more efficient fuel than glucose under most circumstances, and that over the long term, our bodies get less efficient at using glucose, but our efficiency for ketones stays about the same. And that's a really big benefit overall.
Yeah, you can actually generate more ATP per mole from ketones than you can from glucose.
Right.
You just per mole of oxygen. You consume more oxygen per unit of ATP when you burn glucose as opposed to burning ketones.
Right. It's a much cleaner fuel for that reason. And so we talk about this, and there's a huge emphasis in ketosis and ketogenic diets. I think things have sort of evened themselves out now a little bit over the last several years. I mean, we had everybody from Ferris and Atia and all these guys that I know of or know that were doing lots of ketogenic diets. But I think now the key is, I think people are kind of more balanced in their approach, understanding that metabolic flexibility is likely the better idea, being able to go in and out of ketosis and maintain energy production, whether you're in a feeding state or a fasting state. And this kind of leads me to your your like the last part of our conversation, which will be around some of your newer interests. Because look, you've had this, amazing career with like brilliant chemistry, doing these amazing things. And, I'm especially aware of the ketone side, and my colleagues, especially aware on the steroid side of things. But so tell us about some of your newer interests now, Patrick. You were telling me a little bit before we started about some of your interest in NAD and precursors. What's really interesting there for you? And what do you think is going to be sort of new and upcoming in your world as you think about this stuff?
Well, currently I'm not doing research. I'm not developing chemical syntheses because I no longer have my lab, my business. I never did research as far as biological research like Dom does on animals, on rats and such. That was never my thing. I always would collaborate with somebody that did do that stuff.
Makes sense.
Like Dom, perfect example.
Right.
But my own personal interest in anti-aging and general health and performance and feeling good, looking good, and having a clear mind brought me to NAD supplementation, the work of Dr. Sinclair and Sherr.
Sure.
I remember reading about that many, many years ago when the initial research on resveratrol came out, and the whole concept of sirtuins and their dependence on NAD as a cofactor in their in expression of the genes. So then resveratrol still out there, but then NAD got itself became the focus, and it's the administration of precursors to NAD, which can be absorbed orally and can convert in the body, in the blood or the cells. It's a little iffy as to how it actually works. The enzymes are known, but where the conversion takes place is a subject of debate, I suppose. But we do know that NAD activity does definitely increase in the body in several tissues. Brain, possibly muscle, it's a little iffy, but in liver for sure.
Right.
One interesting thing, I don't want to go too much into it, but I did discover that very large dosages of NMN, which is a precursor, administered, use the term parenterally, can completely prevent alcohol intoxication and even consuming large amounts, and this is not recommended for anyone, of alcohol with large amounts of NMN, therefore increasing NAD levels in the liver and supercharging the dehydrogenase enzymes, which I mentioned before, causes such a rapid metabolism of alcohol that you can actually drink a lot and not blow much more than a 0.03.
Interesting.
I didn't really want to mention it.
That's okay. I mean,
but it's just such a dramatic thing that, you can see it working in such a way that's so definable and quantifiable that there's no question in my mind that this stuff is amazing.
And you were taking, this is NMN IV or sub-Q, or what did you have?
It's intramuscular.
Intramuscular. Okay.
Which is not a very convenient way to deliver it.
Intramuscular is never a convenient way to deliver anything.
No, it does. I mean, you get a little sore after a while.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. I mean,
but it was just kind of proof of concept kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, look, you have to do these experiments to understand what's actually working. And I think sometimes it's hard to know, especially something like NMN, because people are taking these supplements all the time now, and they don't know if they're working. If you take NMN, you take NR, do you take NAD? Do you take?
It's all subjective.
Yes,
you can't actually look at something and say, oh, that's evidence on paper, a number to say that this stuff is doing as advertised.
I would call yours a challenge test, Patrick. You did this is a challenge. Okay, I know what this hypothetically should do. Let's see if it actually works. That's what you've done.
It's a little insane.
Yeah, that sounds like that. But that's your ethos, man. It sounds like, look, if you're going to try something, you're going to see if you can get an effect, right? And that's
I'm very impatient, and I want to know now.
Yeah, I got that. And so, look, that there's a nice capacity for you to be able to break a lot of steps in the process. Like, I want to know what this is going to work. I have the understanding of the synthetic pathways. Let's try this and see. So you're playing with some of these precursors. Are there any that are very interesting to you? Like, I think you're mentioning before we started something about one of the polyphenols specifically that you're looking at.
Yes, that is not NAD related.
Okay.
But it is also a natural compound, epicatechin, which is found in cocoa. It's the main polyphenol. Polyphenols are a class of compounds that include flavones, isoflavones, catechins. There's many others, but they all have these phenol groups in them, which are benzene rings with hydroxyls on them. Some of them multiple hydroxyl groups, phenol groups. That's why they're called polyphenols. And this one, epicatechin, is the one that's most abundant in chocolate. It's also quite abundant in green tea. And research has shown that it several things. It is extremely effective in cardiovascular health. It causes vasal relaxation. It increases nitric oxide synthesis, which causes vasodilation. It also has an effect on your body's consumption or your body's preference to what it's going to burn for fuel. For instance, they gave a dose of epicatechin to subjects before eating a meal, obese subjects and normal subjects, and they found that it caused a great increase in the burning of fat after a meal, and also decrease in blood glucose, and less glucose burning, more fat burning, and that was, obviously it has tremendous effects. If you take something like that before you eat,
right,
and your blood glucose is controlled, and you actually burn more fat after eating a meal, which is not something you normally see. But another thing that it does that I found quite interesting is that it affects genes related to the synthesis of two hormones, or you could call it cytokines, or I don't know what classification there are, but one called follistatin and one called myostatin. And they seem to work in conjunction. Follistatin goes up, myostatin goes down. Now, myostatin is the key here. That is the negative regulator of muscle mass. And so your body is always producing a certain amount of myostatin, which inhibits or hinders or puts the brakes on muscle growth. So if you take away myostatin, your muscles will grow more because the brake is released in muscle growth, and all the other things that promote muscle growth will be more effective. So, and it does that quite effectively, and it's been shown multiple times in research. So I'm very interested in that.
Very cool.
And I've been experimenting with ways to administer that, and I've decided that you have to reach a certain dose where subjective effects become quite apparent. And a lot of times these things that work on paper, people have great hope for, don't work in real life. And a lot of times it's just because, well, they're never going to work in real life. But sometimes it's because people just never took the right dose.
Or the right route.
And I think this is one of those things where you got to take the right dose. And I've been experimenting with all kinds of ways of administration. And I decided I just want to do it orally. I don't want to fool around with anything else.
Sure.
So I was able to get a significant amount of the material so I can afford to do high doses. 2 grams a day, to me, I think you can feel it.
It's a difference. Okay. And just for people that are listening, the myostatin knockout gene. So this is something that has been well known in the muscle world forever. These are the people that are gigantic, or like the bull knockout, like the
Belgian blue cattle.
Yeah. That's right. The Thousand cattle. That's right. Yeah. So the gigantic cattle, these are the myostatin knockouts. So when you don't have myostatin,
no fat, all muscle,
you have zero fat and you have all muscle. So I think it's I didn't mean to take away from the NMR that conversation, because I thought that was interesting as well. But this is a really cool sort of circling for you, right? Because in the sense of like, you're looking for other compounds that are helping with muscle building, and of course have lots of other qualities as well from like a longevity anti-aging perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And my two areas are brain health, muscle health, and I think that the two,
they go together.
You shouldn't separate the two, because they both kind of are yin and yang. They work in conjunction. They're synergistic.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I try to address both.
Yeah. What's your favorite NAD precursor right now that you're playing with?
Well, I've never tried nicotinamide riboside, NR.
Okay.
I've only tried nicotinamide mononucleotide,
NMR, yep.
NMN. However, there's something going on in the regulatory world, because somebody, I think, made a drug application for NMN, for a particular disease or something. So the FDA suddenly says, oh, well, you can't sell NMN anymore because somebody's having it developed as a drug, which I find that to be a little dubious, not kosher.
Yeah,
you can't say something. Okay, so somebody wants to develop this as a drug now. Something that's been openly sold as a supplement suddenly can't be anymore.
Yep. Yeah,
I know that Amazon is abiding by the FDA's opinion letter on this, and the FDA is still up in the air. They haven't had a final opinion, and they seem to be stalling, because I think that they know that what they want their opinion to be is just going to not fly.
Yeah,
and they're going to get backlash. And, when people have challenged the FDA before effectively, it's really embarrassed them.
Yes.
So they just want to turn away and just ignore the whole thing. But the NR, nicotinamide riboside, is not being developed as a drug. So that is still available. You can sell that on Amazon. You can't sell NMN. So from this viewpoint of where you can't find NMN, a lot of people will sell NMN, and they're not being harassed or anything, but these big companies, Amazon, ones like that, they won't touch it.
Right. Understood. Yeah. Yeah.
But NR, I don't know if the one is more effective than the other, but I think the NR should be just as effective. NR quickly converts to NMN in the body, which then converts to NAD. So I think they're all, the two should be comparable.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, cool. This has been great, Patrick. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today. I think that your knowledge is it's crazy how much you know about everything we've just described in so much detail. And we just kind of scratched the surface. I'm really interested in your new projects, or at least your new, your interests, at least in NAD. And I think longevity and also some of these polyphenols sound really interesting. Now, I ask this question to everybody at the end of the podcast. It's a question that's sort of like a more of a global question from like the ethos of our podcast, which is that, we ask every guest, what are the 3 ways that you can live smarter, not harder? And this could be any 3 things that you describe. It could be anything from your personal life to professional to anything in between, like the 3 things anybody can do to live a better life, smarter, not harder. Do you have any ideas?
Well, I would say all in moderation.
Okay. I like that.
Don't try to look for answers by doing extreme this or that. Like, I don't know if it was on this podcast or a short conversation we had beforehand, but a lot of people are so into the ketogenic diet they think that's all you have to do all the time. Some people may have to do that because of very
cancer or
particular health concerns.
Yeah.
But I think try this, try that, and don't do anything that is so inconvenient to you that you will never be able to sustain it.
Sure.
You want to live a happy life. You don't want to be miserable and healthy. I don't think the two even could go hand in hand.
Right. Agree.
So
I agree.
I think you definitely need to get enough sleep.
Okay.
You should have a good sleep-wake cycle. Get up early. Avoid stress. Don't let the little stuff drag you down. It's a hard thing to say, but you have to find the people you hang out with, the places you go, the way you format your life.
I love that.
Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Make sure all that stuff works for you, and your body will thank you in the end.
Got it. So moderation, sleep and stress. Those are great. Those are perfect ones.
Yeah.
And I talk about that all the time in my own clinical practice. We talk about that at our nonprofit that's training doctors and practitioners, that like these are the things that everybody needs to do, or else no matter what you try to do from a supplement perspective or a diet perspective, nothing else is going to work or not work very well. And then if sleep is not going well, then everything else goes out the window too. So well said, Patrick. Where can people find out more about you? If there's any websites or any place you'd like them to go to, whether it be online, Instagram, LinkedIn, any other places that they can find out more about your work?
Well, I have a Facebook page.
Okay.
I used to have a blog, and it ended, and now I resurrected it.
Excellent.
It's one word, Patrick Arnold blog.com. I think.
Cool.
It's on a Patreon app. I don't know if you can find it through Patrick Arnold blog. I should have prepared.
That's okay. You can send me the links afterwards. We'll grab them. No worries.
Yeah, maybe you could put up a picture of the link.
Yes, no problem. Yeah, we're happy to.
So people can transcribe it or whatever.
Yeah, we'll get it. No worries. Yeah, no worries at all. So yeah, thanks again, man. It's been really nice to speak with you. And I look forward to chatting more at some point soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Smarter Not Harder podcast, where we give you 1 cent solutions to $64,000 questions. I had a fantastic time speaking to Patrick Arnold. I hope you enjoyed listening to his world views, his steroid synthesis pathways, his history, NAD, polyphenols, and ketones in between. If you like this podcast, please share with your friends, like and subscribe below. We can't wait to have you for another episode soon. Have a great day.